Last season, the Cleveland Cavaliers needed a player that could take the pressure off of star point guard Darius Garland in the worst way after losing Ricky Rubio to a torn ACL after already being down Collin Sexton, who suited up for just 11 games on the season. DG had a usage rate north of 28% from December 30th, which was the first game Rubio missed, to February 6th, the game before Caris made his Cavs debut, a stretch spanning 13 games. That was a top 20 mark in the league during that stretch, in line with DeJounte Murray, Cade Cunningham, RJ Barrett, and more. It was clear as day that they needed another ball handler, and they did what any smart franchise does when in this type of situation. They told Rubio to get up and walk the fuck off. All jokes aside, they went out and acquired Caris LeVert for Rubio, would you know it? More on that in a minute, and draft picks right around the deadline with the hope that he could bring some of what Sexton and Rubio brought to the table. And while that didn't necessarily turn out to be the case in the 19 regular season games he played in, as he would score just 15 or more points or total 5 or more assists in just 7 out of those, he did showcase enough for the Cavs to hold on to him heading into the next season. After all, he did come in mid-season and never found his footing, no pun intended, because of an injury shortly thereafter. But now, his fit has become slightly more complicated as the Cavs just traded for Donovan fucking Mitchell. So he went from being penciled in at the 2 to possibly fighting for the starting 3 spot or sliding back to the bench altogether as the team's presumed 6th man, which is a role that the team may have handed over to Collin Sexton. And speaking of Sexton, unfortunately, he was a necessary piece of the puzzle in regards to acquiring Mitchell. Now, I truly am sad to see him go, but I'm also glad to see him get paid, because I always felt he deserved more than $13.3 million a season. But with that said, Donovan Mitchell is an upgrade, and I'm very interested to see what his fit with Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and others will look like. Also included in that deal was Lauri Markkanen, quite the underrated and, let's be honest, sometimes unsung hero of the lineup. So what does that mean for Caris? Well, LeVert must answer a lot of questions this season. Can he stay healthy for most of it? Can he play off ball effectively? Can he finally use his God-given size to play some truly impactful defense? These are just a few. And at this point, all we know is that LeVert hasn't played in more than 60 games since the 2017-2018 season. He's also been very inconsistent as an off-ball threat, completing just 33.7% of his catch and shoot opportunities for his career, but 43.2% for the Cavs this past season in a much smaller sample size. Like Sexton, LeVert is a better scorer than he is a facilitator. He just gets the job done a bit differently and is a little less efficient. He can operate the pick and roll, attack closeouts, and seems to prefer mid-range jumper over every other type of shot. Now on the defensive side of things, at 6'6" with a 16 wingspan, he has the size to make things difficult for opponents, but rarely has that translated to the court. His defensive rating stands at 112 for his career, and while that is better than the likes of Darius Garland and Collin Sexton, it's still not great, especially when you factor in the size advantage that he has over the two. He had the worst defensive plus-minus of his career with the Cavs. He must work on navigating screens, as this has been a relatively common occurrence throughout his career. He is a decent on-ball defender, but can get caught off guard in off-ball scenarios. And as a secondary ball handler and now possibly tertiary or fourth option in the starting lineup, LeVert can act as somewhat of a connective tissue, as has been seen with Cleveland so far. His 3.9 dimes per game last season ranked 4th on the team behind Garland, Rubio, Rajon Rondo, all of which are point guards. And while assist numbers don't tell just how good of a facilitator a player truly is, his 3.9 aren't bad for the position he plays, and he can act as the team's backup point guard if need be. His assist to turnover ratio was 2.3 on the season between Cleveland and Indiana. That's not far off from LaMelo Ball, Garland, and James Harden, which are some of the best playmakers in the league. In other words, his assist numbers won't wow you, but he's also not going to turn the ball over often either. And last but certainly not least is his contract situation. Now let's not mince words here. Contract negotiations can go either really smoothly, as we just saw with Darius Garland after he inked the most lucrative deal in team history, or they can be rough as hell, as we have seen time and time again with the likes of Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith, and most recently Sexton. Now LeVert is entering the final season of a 3-year, $52.5 million deal and is set to make about $18.8 million this season. And did you know that's actually the 4th highest amount on the Cavs roster at the moment, ahead of Darius Garland, whose extension hasn't kicked in yet. And at 27 years old, LeVert should be entering his prime years, and if he shows to be an ideal fit within the starting lineup or the ideal 6-man type, if he plays very well off the bench, he could be in line to receive another payday after the season in which he'll be an unrestricted free agent. Now, what that next deal could look like is anyone's guess, but I would have to assume it could be something very similar to his current deal, which holds an average of about $17.5 million a season. And some actually believe that he can make upwards of $20.5 million a year, which isn't a crazy thought, but I have to think this has a lot to do with whether or not he starts or comes off the bench. Of course, so many of these questions are left up to hypotheticals. Will the Cavs be able to retain LeVert past this upcoming season? Will the addition of Mitchell impact getting a LeVert deal done? Could we see a deal closer to the deadline that ships him out of town? Again, these are all questions LeVert will have to address through his play on the court this season. So why is the 2022-23 season so important for LeVert? Well, with so many players vying for time at both guard spots and the 3, he could find himself easily ceding minutes to Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, Ricky Rubio, Cedi Osman, or others if he doesn't ball out. It's also completely possible that he could find himself on another team altogether. In a contract year, playing for a possible contender and fighting for the right to claim a role as a starter, he has no choice but to bring his A game. Hell, LeVert should have a bitter taste in his mouth after back-to-back playing game losses in which he shot just 9 of 25 from the field and faded when the team needed him the most. We could be in store for the most motivated version of him yet. Time will tell.